Put this straight for me. Let me share this with you. God in His wisdom selected this group of men and women to be the purveyors of His goodness. In selecting them through whom to bring about this phenomenon, He went not to the proud, the mighty, the famous, or the brilliant. He went instead to the humble, to the sick, to the unfortunate. He went right to the drunkard, the so-called weakling of the world. Well might He have said unto us, unto your weak and feeble hands I have entrusted a power beyond estimate. To you has been given that which has been denied the most learned of your fellows. Not to scientists or statesmen, not to wives or mothers, not even to my priests or ministers have I given this gift of healing other alcoholics, which I entrust to you. It must be used unselfishly. It carries with it grave responsibility. No day can be too long. No demands upon your time can be too urgent. No case too pitiable. No task too hard. No effort too great. It must be used with tolerance, for I have restricted its application to no race, no creed, and no denomination. Personal criticism you must expect. Lack of appreciation will be common. Ridicule will be your lot. Your motives will be misjudged. Success will not always attend your efforts in your work with other alcoholics. You must be prepared for adversity, for what men call adversity is the ladder you must use to ascend the rungs toward spiritual perfection. And remember, in the exercise of this power, I shall not exact of you beyond your capabilities. You are not selected because of exceptional talents. And be careful always if success attends your efforts, not to ascribe to that to which you can lay claim only by virtue of my gift. If I'd wanted learned men to accomplish this mission, the power would have been entrusted to the physicians and the scientists. If I'd wanted eloquent men, there would have been many anxious for the assignment, for talk is the easiest used of all talents with which I have endowed mankind. If I'd wanted scholarly men, the world is filled with better qualified men than you who would be available. You were selected because you have been the outcasts of the world. And your long experience as drunkards has made or should make you humbly alert to the cries of distress that come from the lonely hearts of alcoholics everywhere. Keep ever in mind the admission you made on the day of your profession in Alcoholics Anonymous, namely, that you are powerless, and that it was only with your willingness to turn your life and will into my keeping that relief came to you. And to that I can only say amen. Now then, we're going to be talking about the ninth step tonight. You know, a lot of people, when they come in and they begin to look around and they look, we got these steps up here on the board, they're up here. Right in front of people, brand new people, got to come in and stare at those things and say, whoa, wait a minute, I got to do what? And one of the things which can be very terrifying right from the very beginning is this idea of having to make amends. Because, you know, if we look at ourselves, we look at our own histories, we can realize that a lot of this stuff is what we ran from. I mean, we did geographics to get away from this. We dodged the bullets. We ran, we lied, we procrastinated. We did everything in the world we could think of not to have to face the people we'd harmed. And here, we come in here and we think at first this is going to be a nice little benign program. It's going to kind of show me how I cannot drink and everybody will love me and everybody will know that I'm so sick and they'll pat me on the head and say, good dog, and everything will be good. Now they're saying to me, I've got to go out and do the one thing that's absolutely terrified me for the last 10 years. Yes, that's true. Well, why? And what's the point of this? Why is it necessary? Why is this part of a spiritual program leading to a spiritual awakening? The answer is very simple. When we go back to the basics and we find that we are powerless, and we find that we are powerless over personal superiority, we also find that we are powerless over our thinking, we find that we are powerless over our defects of character, we find we are powerless over our insanities, and we find that we're powerless over our guilt and remorse and shame. And all of these things block us from God. In the third step prayer, we ask God, take away my difficulties, God. What do we mean by that? On further reflection, we realize we're talking about our defects, our insanities, and our guilt. Please take these away, God, so that the victory you give me over these things will allow me to be an example to those I would help of your power, God, and your love and your way of life, so that I can help them. So when we look at this head on, we realize that somewhere along the line we're going to have to do something to be rid of this guilt. Because guilt is going to block us from God just as surely as our resentments, our dishonesty, or our selfishness, or our fear. And so we have the 8th and 9th steps. And it's the 9th step, which is the action step, which, if properly done, will relieve us of our guilt and turn us loose, turn our spirits loose, leading to a restoration of sanity, leading to entering the world of the Spirit, leading to becoming God conscious, leading to a spiritual awakening. Therefore, it becomes crystal clear when we reflect upon it that if we are not freed from our guilt, therefore, because we have not worked our 9th step, that there's no hope for us, because we're still blocked from God. Go back to basics again. The only way that we're going to recover is to put God solidly between us and the booze. And one of the things that we must do, and the work of the 4th through the 9th steps are clear, that we're on a mission there to fit ourselves, be a maximum service to God and the people about us, and to do that we have to be free of the things which block us. And it's only after we have done these things that we can then expect the promises all will come true. They've been coming true all the way through, but we can begin to see the culmination of all this, and it leads, of course, to the spiritual awakening. So therefore, when we look at the 9th step, we're looking at a step which is utterly crucial. It is mandatory, it must be done, and in AA, must means or else. And right at the top of page 77, it gives us the beginning clue for what we need to know here. I'm talking about new people, because that's what this book was written for, remember. Right at the top of the page, at the moment we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. And here's the real kicker. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. What does that connote? It obviously connotes action on our part, doesn't it? It says these are things that we must do. Now, that does not mean that God doesn't have a part in it, because obviously He does. But first, we must do what we are required to do, and then God will do what He promises. And it's going to be the same way with us the rest of our lives. First, we do what we are supposed to do, and then God will do what He promises. And we learn that as we work our steps. So we notice here then that our job is to do everything necessary to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God. One of the things we must do is we must make amends. Now, making amends has several different twists to it, but basically we can look at it as trying to set the record straight, or trying to find some way that we can be helpful to those we've harmed, some way to not erase the past, but to ameliorate the effects of the past that it had on other people. What about this ninth step? Let's think about this ninth step in terms of the mechanics, because really, you know, if we look at the big book, we look at the steps in the big book, we're going to find that they're very practical, that they show us a course of action, that they lay out for us the things we must do, and that they're very logical. AA and the 12 steps, there's nothing metaphysical or esoteric about this stuff. It's all very straightforward. Here's what you do. And when you do it, here's what's going to happen. And so with the ninth step in the big book is laid out in such a way that we can identify the various parts of that step and the things that we must do within each of those parts. Now, this is not true of other literature or any of the stuff that comes out of treatment centers or Hazelton or the rest of them. But in the big book, we find the instructions, and they're laid out very clearly for us. One of the things that is interesting to me is that if you look on page 77, if you have your book, we're really being instructed to attack the first and hardest one first. The person we used to hate. It's important when you read that paragraph to realize that it does not say the person I hate. The person I hated. Why? Well, we've worked our fourth step, haven't we? And that person was on our resentment list, wasn't he? And we prayed for him, didn't we? And we asked God to make us willing to forgive him, didn't we? And as Bill said, if you finish your fourth step and you still have any resentments left, you didn't do it right. So we've had the spiritual solution to that hatred, that resentment all along. Now, there's a kind of a corollary here, and you might check yourself out on this. If you're balking at making an amends with somebody, there's every reason to believe you never forgave them. There's every reason to believe that that hatred and resentment is still there. But the big book states it in the past tense because that's where it ought to be. So this person that we hated will be the first one on our list. We're going to test our mettle. We're going to test our faith. We're going to ask God for help to do this, because we're pretty sure that when we approach this person, it's going to be a Donnybrook. We're pretty sure that because of the hatred that we had for this person, the hatred was shared, was reciprocated, and it's going to be a tough time. 99% of the time, that's not true. But we don't know that, and this is the way we react to it. So we're going to go to the person we hated. And sometimes, and many times, this person we hated has done us a lot more harm than we've done him. Over and over again, as a sponsor, I hear people say the same things. Why should I make amends to him? Look what he did to me. And I have to say to them, look at what you're hanging on to. Look at what you're hanging on to. Are you going to let this person rule your life? Are you going to throw away your life just because you think you're justified in your anger and your hatred? That's crazy. Is your life not worth more than that? Is your spirit not worth more than that? And I hope the answer is yes, it must be. And so it may be, and the big book says that he's done more harm to us than we've done him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude to him, we're still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. Here's the rule. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. Now there's a kind of a corollary here too, because this is just another way of stating something we learn in here. You want to know what the right thing to do is? It's going to be the hardest thing to do. Isn't that strange? The right thing is going to be the hardest thing. And especially for those of us who have always taken the easier, softer way whenever we could, who have spent our lives rationalizing, excusing, and living in a fool's paradise of self-delusion. But we can't afford to do that anymore, because our lives are at stake, our very lives are at stake here. And so we're going to go to the person who was the biggest bugaboo in our lives, and we're going to make that our first order of business. Now, some sponsors are going to say no, and that's okay. This is the way the Big Book has it laid out. Personally, I agree with this, because I think that there's such a wonderful carryover from this. Once we have done it with God's help, it's going to be a lot easier to do many of the other amends that we have to do. Down at the bottom of page 77, we've got some general rules here that have to do with making amends. Let's see what they are. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply we tell him that we will never get over drinking till we've done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. Now listen to this. Now, his faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we'll be gratified with the result. Now this just runs contrary to everything that we've ever learned. You're supposed to stand up for yourself. You're not supposed to be a doormat for anybody. You don't let anybody push you around. And if it's something needs saying, we're going to say it, and on and on and on and on. Pride ourselves on our honesty about other people's faults, which is kind of weird, isn't it? And yet, yes, Howard.
I heard what you said, and I've heard it for a long time. However, if you would glance up to the top of the page in the first chapter, if the individual is our worst enemy and was our worst enemy, the book tells me it is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. The prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message.
Yes, Howie, that's right. You read it correctly. The problem is that refers to 12-stepping somebody, not making amends, I think. Isn't that right?
No, sir.
Where is it? Tell me what page.
77.
All right.
It's a 9 step.
Oh, okay.
About making amends.
Let me see if I can put that in context. How he's talking about this business of not going to somebody and announcing that we have become religious or highly spiritual and place ourselves on a spiritual pedestal in order to set ourselves apart or to excuse, in a sense, what we have done. It's the same thing. When I was in prison, everybody got religion in prison. Every time the preacher came by, the cell block emptied out. They were all over there in the chapel. And so it's really telling us the same thing, I think, here, Howie, that we're not to try to excuse ourselves or to ameliorate in any sense the harm we've done by announcing our religiosity or our spirituality.
But I was talking about approaching the individual who we feel we had the greatest resentment towards. And it's specifically saying don't if he's still smarting.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think this has to do, let's see, let me read what you did again. Our man is sure to be impressed, okay. Branded fanatics, we may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. Okay, and then it's gone. Oh, okay. What's happened here?
The first sentence right after our maximum purpose.
Yeah, I see it now, Linda. What it's saying to us is that we're killing a chance to be to have future impact because we've killed it with our religiosity or our protestations of spirituality, rather than simply coming right out and talking about what it is that we've done wrong. I believe that's what it means. I'm sure that you will be discussing that with me at length at some future time. Any of you in the back, Kim?
Yeah, what I understand to say is it's so nice to approach an individual who still stands for our injustice and announce that we've gone religious. Like, say, I stole $5,000 from my employer who had her own small business and she was forced to declare bankruptcy.
Well, shame on you for doing that.
Okay, I just made that up.
Oh, okay.
Let's say, and then just go to her when she's still fuming mad, got a lawsuit against me and everything, and say, I want to tell you I've found religion. God's going to save me, and kind of general
Sure.
nonsense like that, rather than paying her back. Yeah. Telling how wrong we've been.
That sounds exactly right to me, Kim.
I'm fairly new at all this, but I think we're getting a little out of whack right now.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, now let's think about, there are a couple of other rules here to this business of making amends. One of them is that we are to do nothing to harm the other person, either the person to whom we're making amends or others. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with us. It doesn't say we're not doing anything to harm ourselves. It says we're not to harm them or others. And there are several examples of this, and as a matter of fact, as we get into the other parts of the ninth step, we'll find these leaping right out at us. In two areas especially, in the area of criminal amends, where we've done criminal things, and we need to make amends. And quite often that's going to mean being prosecuted, perhaps sent to prison. We're not permitted to do that until we have received permission from those who would be seriously harmed by our making that amends. And also in the realm of extramarital stuff and cheating and all those things, it's very important that we be careful not to harm the other person or not to harm the person we cheated on, because sometimes the worst thing we can do in making amends is to make them relive the horrors of the past. And it's equally important to remember this when we're making amends. For example, let's say to family. The family may have lived with us and with our disease for many, many years and suffered through much. And in order for us to make amends to them, we have to be careful we don't make them sit down for 2 or 3 hours while we recount all the things we did to them. This can be very harmful. And a good sponsor will help you with that, to delineate and to discriminate where you can go full bore with stuff and where you have to be very careful. Okay. Let's go over to page 78 now. It's talking here, and this is a very important paragraph right top of page 78, because it really tells us the truth about what's really going to happen when we go out to make amends that we are afraid of making because people might be very angry with us still. It says in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own fault, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. Now this brings up a really important point in making amends. So many people feel that the result of the amends ought to be that they are forgiven. That is not so at all. We're not making amends to be forgiven. We're making amends to be set free from the guilt and remorse and shame. Another thing that may mystify people at first, and we need to help them and explain to them what's going on here. We say on the one hand that you got to make amends to be set free from your guilt, and on the other hand, but there are some amends you can't make, either because someone would be harmed by it, or perhaps the people to whom we owe amends are no longer around, or we can't find them, and so on. And then we also say in other parts of the book that we may be making some amends for the rest of our lives. So then you take that and you parlay it into 10, 11, and 12, and you say, well, I'm never going to get to the 10th step. But I'll still be making amends when I'm on the day I die, or I may not be able to find these people for 15 years. Do you mean to tell me I can't start working the 10th step? No, we don't mean to tell you that at all. The Big Book doesn't make those kinds of crazy mistakes at all. It's an inspired work, because what it tells us is that when we get to the 10th step, we're going to get to the 10th step as, just that one little word, 2 letters, as we clean up the past. In other words, we may be making amends for a long time, but very shortly after we commence making amends, we're going to begin, as our sponsors instruct us, working the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps. Otherwise, it could be that we never would get to them. So that's not going to work. Okay. Another thing that is very important to remember, and this kind of bottom line stuff, excuse the expression, it's not unique here, but you practice it. It is the key to being released from the guilt is the willingness to make amends. Now, there may be some times when we can't make them. But if we're truly, truly willing to make amends if we can, we will be released from the guilt. If that were not so, we could be carrying that stuff around with us, and all the 12 steps would crash. And so it comes back to this question of willingness. Over and over and over again, we find this same thing popping up. If you look back through the steps, remember that it is only necessary that we be willing to believe that there just might be a God out there somewhere. And that is sufficient to get started on our second step. It is necessary for us to be willing to make amends. It's necessary for us to be willing to be freed from our defects of character. It's necessary for us to be willing to forgive. All of these things is necessary for us to be willing to make amends, and that comes up as early as our 4th step. And in some parts of the Big Book it says, if you're not willing, you got to pray for the willingness till it comes. And so now we find this willingness as being absolutely essential here in the 9th step, because it is that willingness which is the saving grace of this step. It is that which will allow us to be set free from our guilt, even though we may not be able to make the amends that we would otherwise be required to make. And there are many examples of this in the Big Book. A lot of people don't recognize how the Big Book is set up to help us, not to hinder us, not to put roadblocks in our way. For example, people are always asking me, how do I know God's will for me? I'm just going to, if I just sit still, maybe I won't get in trouble. Dr. Paul answered that very succinctly by saying, I just do what's in front of me to be done and leave the results up to God, and however it turns out, that's His will for me. That's a pretty nice statement. But the Big Book answered a little bit differently. What it says is this, that so long as we do as we believe God would have us do, truly believe that this is what God would have us do, and leave the results of our actions up to Him, that He will enable us to match calamity with serenity. That's the out clause. That's where it all comes back, always comes back to us. Always. It is the actions we're willing to take which will dictate our progress and our continued spiritual progress for the rest of our lives. So those are kind of the basic rules of the 9th step. And then on page 78, we get into the second part of the ninth step, which has to do with money. And of course, this is something which is almost sure to crop up. Not everybody comes in here owing money, but most do in one form or another. So we're going to make money amends. Now the rule is that we're not going to dodge our creditors. Well, boy, that's something we've gotten pretty good at that. And if it gets too rough, we get out of town, you know.
Get out of this.
And then there are always the bankruptcy laws, and you know, and it's wiggle around and cheat and steal and do everything you can. Don't have to, you know, how in the world does anybody expect us to pay them back when we got to use all our money for booze, you know? We don't dodge our creditors. And here's what happened. Let me give you some practical advice. This just comes out of my own experience. You can do it or not as you please, but it's worked pretty well for me and the people I work with. We sit down and we list the monetary amends that have to be made. And we take a look at the budget. We take, see if there's any kind of budgets. Not everybody's working yet, but most people have found a way or have some money coming in. We budget it out and see if there's any money left over. If there's money that you don't absolutely have to have, this is money that you would otherwise be spending on something for yourself or some luxuries. Can you set aside $10 a month? Can you set aside $20 a month? Is there anything that you can pay right now? And usually we're going to find that there's some money left over that can be used as to begin to reduce the debts. It's a very good practice to go to the creditors and tell them, I acknowledge this debt, and if you can make some payments, you need to commit yourself to make those payments, but only if you really are committed to doing it, because the worst thing you can do is say, promise do it and then not do it. And so we're careful about that, but we're going to own up to the debts. And usually what happens is that we're going to find a pretty willing bunch of creditors out there that are going to be willing to give us some leeway. And a lot of times, especially on these bigger debts and with banks and so forth, if it's been a long-standing debt, you'll find it's already been written off. You've been worrying about it for years and years and years, and the bank's forgotten you a long time ago. And you say, well, I'd like to reinstate this debt and pay it off. And they say, no, you don't. It cost us more to set your account back up and readjust our taxes where we wrote you off than we could ever get out of you. So go away.
Well, I got a
And
question then.
or
What about those collection agencies that call you and say they bought your debt?
well, you see, they're lying because they didn't actually buy it. What they have is a contract to keep 50% of whatever they collect from you. Every once in a while, you find somebody out there who will buy debt at a big discount, like, you know, they buy it for 20 cents on the dollar or 10 cents on the dollar. I have absolutely no patience for those people at all.
So once it's been turned over 7 times, the bank wrote it off, and these people are just trying to collect and get a percentage of what they get.
Sure, that's what collection agencies do. And it's just a numbers game. They got enough stuff sitting on their desk that every once in a while somebody pays and they get money out of it. I just signed up a collection agency for my business. I know I'm going to have some bad debts, and they get them.
I'll work for you.
There we go. See, got a volunteer already. Listen to that voice. You're probably good on the phone.
No, better in person.
Oh, I see. You got your education in New York, I guess, huh? Okay.
Jersey.
In Jersey. All right. So, we're going to acknowledge the debt, and we're going to make every effort to retire the debt, and many of them will be forgiven. And a lot of times, you know, when you go to family where you've stolen from them or borrowed from them, and a lot of times they're really embarrassed to want to try to collect the money. But I think it's good practice to say, look, Mom, I know how you feel about this, but bear with me here because I really need to repay you. It would be old behavior for us kind of tuck our tail between our legs and skulk off and say, wow, man, I just got out of that one. I don't have to pay her back. That would be, I think that's not a good idea. And that's kind of like individual case, but let's practice a high degree of integrity. And let's not worry about what other people think. Let's worry about what we know is right. And if we know it's the right thing to do, let's do it. Also, I think it's important to remember that you're not the one in trouble. See, you got their money, and they don't got yours. They're the ones that need the money. You've already had it. So we're not going to worry too much about it from that standpoint, but we are going to take this very seriously from the standpoint of these debts being a block between us and God. And believe me, when you think back and when you reflect back on how long these debts have been hanging around, some of them, how they have affected you and affected your thinking, and how you've hidden from them and probably had a few drinks over them, we want to get rid of them. Now that's the second part of the fourth step. Make amends as quickly as you can. Do not commit yourself to more than you can commit to doing. And as your fortunes increase, then increase your payments and get it taken care of. And one day it'll all be done. The third part of the ninth step is criminal offenses. Now, this is a tough one for some people. I don't have anybody looking for me, thank God, at least not that I know of. And when they were looking for me, they found me. That wasn't too good. And then they stuck me in slam, and I paid my debt to society, such as it was. I still don't think I owed them a dime or anything, one minute of time, but then they didn't agree. In any event, these criminal offenses are real bad medicine. There are a lot of people in AA, and maybe nobody in this room, but there are a lot of people in AA who are looking over their shoulder all the time, wondering if the sheriff is there ready to arrest them. They're scared to death to get a traffic ticket. They wonder they're not sure how many warrants are out for them. And their life is a misery. It's an absolute misery. And it can't get any better, because this is an unresolved terror and fear which is just going to be with them. So we have to find some way to deal with this. Also, if you do enough 12-step work and sponsor enough, you're going to run into some pretty serious stuff. I've had two people I sponsored who were murderers. Neither one of them had ever been caught, and one of them had been a contract guy up in New York, and he had 7 or 8 people on his conscience. He didn't even remember their names, never knew their names, I guess. So, but for the most part, these crimes are pretty pedestrian. A lot of it has to do with DUIs and stuff like that. We got to take care of them. One of the fellows I sponsor he was wanted in 5 counties in Florida. So he said, "What do I do?" I said, "You're going to have to make the grand tour of Florida." So he went from county to county, and he ended up spending a total of about 9 months in jail. But when he got through with all 5 counties, he was clean. And it really set him free. That's not going to work out that way for everybody, obviously. But on the other hand, you see, the problem with having an unresolved criminal history is that you'll never be free of it until you resolve it. Now, once in a while you run into a situation where it's impossible to do this, to make amends in any way by giving oneself up and taking one's punishment, because it may be too harmful to people who depend upon us. Now this happened in one of the cases that I had where the guy was a murderer. He since it was remarried and had 2 children. Now the rule in the big book and the rule in AA is pretty clear. He had to go to his wife and gain from her permission to turn himself in. And of course she was not willing to give that, because that would in effect have made her a widow. And raised the kids by herself. So she said no. Now, was it enough for him? Was he able to survive that? Yes, he was. And it may sound kind of strange to you, but it's my personal opinion that he demonstrated his willingness to make amends if he could, and that was for God's purpose. That was what was required. In any event, he's still sober many, many years later, doing quite well. In fact, I believe his oldest child is now in college. So there's all kinds of miracles going on around here, and you know, when we do the next right thing, when we stand up, be counted, it's amazing what God will do for us. Amazing. And sometimes I say to people, gee, why am I not surprised when they come to me with these amazing stories? I've heard them so often now. It's not old hat or anything like that. We certainly don't take it lightly, but yet miracles are all around us. This room is a room of miracles, you know. Every one of us. We've had the second great miracle in our lives worked for us. The first when we were born, the second when God got us in the door. For everybody in here, the 10 people out there never will make it. They're no different from us. They're just not, they weren't chosen. Amazing thing when you stop to think about this chance we've been given at life. Let's go on here on page 79. Now we're talking about people who have warrant for their arrest, common form of trouble. Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing no matter what the personal consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be, for we must not shrink at anything. Now here's the other side. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried because of resentment and drinking. He had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life and secured a position, was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he'd walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary. But if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not. Oh boy, Bill doesn't know some of those ex-wives I've heard of. Of course she did not, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. So you can see that this ninth step is kind of strange in the hierarchy of the steps, because there's a lot of if, as, whens, and comes, and buts and maybes about it, and it's pretty important for us to recognize that there's some general rules that we have to follow, but that it's hard to lay down specifics that we must do because each individual case may be different. So it's wise for us to know how we are to proceed if we can. But it's really important, and we'll come back and finish it up next week, but it's really important to understand this one thing, that the key to being forgiven and released from the burden of guilt is our willingness to make amends if we can. That's the key. All right, let's see. We have to now pay the rent. Wait a second, Howie. Oops. Ready? Oops. Here we go. Howie, I got to get through all this stuff first. All right, go ahead. What do you want? What's up?
Now, I'm told that I make amends not for the person I'm making the amends to, but for myself to remove the guilt that I've lived with throughout my life.
Right.
Now, I also ask God to remove my character defects in the seventh step, which is selfishness and self-centeredness. So to me, this is almost a selfish act that I'm doing, because I'm doing it for myself.
No, you're not doing it for yourself, pal. You're doing it for God. You got to remember what we're talking about here. Guilt blocks you from God, keeps you from what you must do, which is to fit yourself to be of maximum service to Him. It has nothing to do with selfishness. All right, this is the Bottom Line Group Secretary's report. We have 58 meetings a week, and they're listed on the green chalkboard. We need 2 years of sobriety to chair a Big Buck Step or Tradition meeting, 1 year to chair an 8:30 p.m. or Beginners meeting, 6 months to chair a regular meeting. Anniversary night is held the last Sunday of the month at 7 p.m. If you're celebrating a year or more, add your name to the anniversary board. We will gladly celebrate with you. Business meetings are held the first Sunday of the month at 6:45 p.m. If you'd like to be a member of the Bottom Line Group, sign your name in the black book on the desk. You must be a member to vote on any motions or group conscience. A weekly cleaning party is held every Saturday at 1 p.m. This is a rewarding opportunity for service. Please come out. There are AA and non-AA related bulletin boards around the room for information. Literature and grapevines on the rack for sale at cost. Please don't pay me. I don't know what to do with the money. Please keep the grounds clean and remember to park where you're supposed to out there. And remember, there are places you're not supposed to park, and if you do that, you're likely to get towed. There's a temporary sponsor list on the back wall of what? That's an oxymoron. Okay, let's just call it a sponsor list, all right? There's a sponsor list on the back wall. Take a name off if you need a sponsor and put your name on if you're willing to be a sponsor. Would all those willing to be sponsors please raise your hands? Thank you. The Bottom Line Group Conscience. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? Let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. A moment of silence for those who are still suffering, and then we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. Thank you. Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. Wherever it's your birthday.
Mike.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'll be there. All right, man. Later.
Oh, these are his meetings. Yeah, they'll end up
Obviously, I didn't have to.
Actually, I'll take a couple.
My name's Jim.
All right, James. All right, Michael. That's for you, son. There you go. All righty, let's settle down now. Let's have an AA meeting. I want to welcome you to the bottom line group of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's our regular Tuesday 8:30 step meeting. And my name is Jim, and I am an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Glad to see all of you here. Well, let's see. Oh, here we go. It's a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We ask that you silence your cell phones and pagers at this time, and please refrain from cursing when you share. Could I please have 3 or more volunteers to clean up after the meeting? Where are you all? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, good. In support of AA singleness of purpose, attendance at closed meetings is limited to persons who have a desire to stop drinking. If you think you have a problem with alcohol, you're welcome to attend this meeting. We ask that when discussing our problems, we confine ourselves to those problems as they relate to alcoholism. And would you please join me in a moment of silent meditation? We'll say the Serenity Prayer together. Thank you, Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept these things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, and may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. And there are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. And AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober, help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And the primary purpose of an Alcoholics Anonymous group and meeting is the teaching and practice of the 12 steps. And of course, that's what we do in this meeting. Now then, it is customary, and wait a second, I got to find out about something here. Oh yeah. If anybody here has been out improving their resume or doing further intensive research, just coming back, like to give us your first name, please. All right, anyone here tonight who's in their first ever AA meeting, fear and trembling, wondering why you're here and what are all these people doing here, just give us your first name so we can leap all over you after the meeting. I'm just kidding. Only a few of us will do that. Nobody knew? Nobody admits they're new. We have anybody visiting tonight from anywhere on the planet other than Deerfield Beach? No visitors. All right. Now then, it's customary and traditional in this group to read a portion of Chapter 5 from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you have your big book, open it up to page 58 and let's follow along as Michael reads for us.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael, I'm an alcoholic. And how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who will thoroughly follow our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our story is disclosed in a general way, what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have, and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us had tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked for his protection and care for complete abandon. Here are the steps we took with such suggestion as a program of recovery. 1. We admit that we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We are entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so will injure them or others. 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and where we're wrong, promptly admit it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us have been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our own personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholics and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could have put it inside.
Good, thank you, Michael. That was a pretty good chorus you got there at the end, too. All right, it's also customary and traditional in this group to read the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, and our friend Jim is going to do that for us. Hey, Jim.
12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. Number 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous, except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise. These problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity and the animal enemy at the level of press, radio, and film. There you go. I got problems with that, I'm sorry. It's the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personality.
Thank you, Jim. All you gotta do is say the A word.
The A word.
Okay.
Like I said, the animal enemy.
Is this thing on? You can hear everything? Okay. All right, tonight, by the way, if you came in late, my name's Jim. I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here. I'm delighted to see all of you here. This is wonderful. We're getting a really great turnout for this meeting now, and I love to see it. By the way, my sobriety date is December 20th, 1964, and I've been sober through the grace of God since that time. Now then, I like to do this every once in a while because I like to remind myself why I'm here. At one time, I would love to have thought that I had some very special merit for having been selected by God for this wonderful program and for sobriety and for spiritual awakening and all the great benefits that go with it. But I realize that that's not true. It's probably just the opposite. And at one time, a long time ago, an anonymous person wrote a little treatise on this question, why were we chosen? And I like to share it every once in a while to remind myself why I'm here and kind of put us all in the same perspective so that it's awfully easy to think that somehow or another we deserve it, or this is what it ought to be, and all those people out there, poor dummies, it's too bad about them, but here we are. Well,